While Marcus Antonius marched off to Greece with Caesar Divi-Filius, his wife, Fulvia Flaccia Bambula, continued to dwell in Rome with her children of 3 marriages: a son named Publius Clodius by her first husband, a son named Gaius Scribonius Curio by her second husband, and by her third husband, 2 sons named Antulus and Iulus Antonius, the youngest born only months before her husband's departure from Italy. Claudia Pulchra, Fulvia's daughter by her first husband, had been given in marriage to Caesar Divi-Filius, a politically arranged union designed to cement the formation of the Second Triumvirate. As wife of the triumvir Marcus Antonius and mother-in-law of Caesar Divi-Filius, Fulvia reigned supreme in Rome. With no regard for the status of the third triumvir, Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, the Senate had embraced pleasing Fulvia as a priority, making certain not to pass any legislation without her approval. But following the battles of Philippi, which saw her husband and son-in-law victorious over the forces of Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, Fulvia was not content with the newly assigned distribution of Rome's territories. It would not have taken long before she heard the rumors that the son of the divine Julius Caesar had hidden in the marshes while his camp was being overrun, or that 16,000 of his men were slaughtered by the liberators. It was abundantly clear to Fulvia that it was not the cowardly Divi-Filius, but her husband, Marcus Antonius, who was responsible for the victory at Philippi. So how was it fair that he should now have to share power with Caesar? To make matters worse, only Caesar Divi-Filius had returned to Italy, having been tasked with settling their many legions on land they surely deserved, while the husband had traveled to Rome's eastern provinces to initiate a reorganization. But people had selective memories. If it was the seemingly benevolent Caesar who had been the one to settle more than 50,000 men on farmland, and who had been the one paying them for their service, while Antonius was out of sight and out of mind, then it would be Caesar whom the legions would remember and revere, and Caesar whom they would support. But Caesar's settling of the legions was not going as well as he'd hoped. Not only did the triumvir's legions need lands on which to settle, but land was also needed for the legions from the liberator armies who had joined the ranks of the victors. Rome required enough ground to accommodate the settling of approximately 50,000 men, which was not readily available. Caesar risked trading away his popularity if he ventured to take land away from the Roman people to provide for his legions. Yet, should Caesar fail to deliver on his promises and alienate his legions, they would quickly find a more reliable benefactor. Choosing to guarantee himself the loyalty of his legions, at the people's expense, Caesar began confiscating farmland across Italy and giving it to his men. After being forced to pay for the triumvir's war through a 50% tax on their crop yield, which had caused severe inflation in the price of grain, Italy's farmers were rewarded with eviction from their properties and with no accompanying compensation. At least 18 towns in Italy were seized to provide land for Rome's legions, driving out the unsuspecting populations of those towns. And as if to add insult to injury, as the suddenly poverty-stricken were starving in droves, Sextus Pompeius, the last living son of Pompeius Magnus, hoping to pressure the triumvirs into legitimizing his position in Sicily, thought nothing of using the navy he had built to prevent grain shipments from reaching Italy. Chasing after the same political goal as Caesar, and enlisting the influence of her brother-in-law, Lucius Antonius, who was one of the 41 BC consuls, Fulvia did her best to delay Caesar's settling of the legions, hoping to hold it in abeyance until her husband returned to Rome to claim the credit due him. But after failing to halt their progress, Fulvia instead traveled with her children to each new settlement. In town after town, the wife of the triumvir addressed the legions, reminding them that their good fortune was owing to their commander, Marcus Antonius. But by constantly peddling her husband's name in association with the settlements, Fulvia ultimately did him little political good. Likewise, Caesar's ruthless approach to settling the legions backfired. The people and the politicians alike learned the sad truth that soldiers are not farmers. As a large portion of the harvests of 41 BC failed, grain prices shot even higher, and the threat of starvation loomed large for even more of Rome's citizens. Many who had been driven from their homes and farmlands migrated to Rome. Living in the streets of the Suburra, they survived by whatever means possible. Crime skyrocketed as homes were vandalized. People were assaulted in the streets and stripped of their possessions. Outside Rome, many of the dispossessed assembled to form large raiding parties. Organizing coordinated attacks against smaller towns and villages, these gangs looted the granaries, leaving the citizens of the towns to starve. Before long, the rumors of her husband's exploits in the east reached Rome and also reached Fulvia. While touring Anatolia and reorganizing the provinces, Marcus Antonius had begun an affair with a Cappadocian courtesan by the name of Glaphyra. The wife of the high priest of Comana, Glaphyra was a hetaira, or a member of a special class of prostitutes whose training and high education allowed them to move within royal circles. Then, after a much-publicized meeting with the Egyptian queen, Cleopatra VII, in Tarsus, Antonius scandalized the world by ordering the brutal murder of Cleopatra's sister, Arsinoe IV, executing her on the temple steps of the Artemision. Fulvia decided it was high time to facilitate her husband's immediate return to Rome, where he could address important matters that would serve to tear him away from the allure of Eastern women like Glaphyra and Cleopatra. And so, suddenly changing her strategy, Fulvia ceased presenting herself to the legions as the representative of her husband, and together with her brother-in-law, the consul Lucius Antonius, took up the cause of the people dispossessed of their homes and properties. With Caesar out of the city, negotiating with Sextus Pompeius, in hopes of bringing an end to his blockade of Italy, Lucius Antonius called upon approximately 6 legions from the northern region of Italy, formerly known as Cisalpine Gaul. As Fulvia began raising legions of her own, Lucius Antonius marched on Rome, chasing the disenfranchised triumvir Marcus Aemilius Lepidus out of the city. The legions of Lucius Antonius now occupied Rome as he promised the Roman people an end to the Second Triumvirate. In response to the cavalier actions of Lucius Antonius and Fulvia, and as a consequence of an opportunity which presented itself during his negotiations with Sextus Pompeius, Caesar Divi Filius divorced his wife, Claudia Pulchra, and returned her to her mother, Fulvia, stating that she was Virgo intacta, as he had never consummated the marriage. He then gave over the command of his legions to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, who immediately began marching them towards Rome. Lucius Antonius withdrew first to the town of Praeneste. From there, he sent word to his brother's commanders. Gaius Asinius Pollio, Publius Ventidius, and Quintus Fufius Callinus were urged to march their forces from Gaul to his aid. Pollio, Ventidius, and Callinus arrived in Praeneste to meet with Lucius Antonius, but not accompanied by their legions. Before committing to another war, the generals wanted to know if Lucius Antonius and Fulvia were acting on the orders of triumvir Marcus Antonius. Evading the question, Lucius Antonius's answers neither confirmed nor denied the involvement of Marcus Antonius, yet he continued to press them to march their legions to Rome. Lucius Antonius then withdrew to nearby Perugia, where he was besieged by Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa. Drawing from her own financial resources, Fulvia funded 2 more legions, placing them under the command of her husband's general, Lucius Munatius Plancus. Dressed in full body armor, Fulvia accompanied Plancus as he led her 2 legions to the aid of her brother-in-law, but they were confronted by the forces of Agrippa. In anticipation of her arrival, Agrippa had positioned his men so as to prevent her from reaching Perugia. From across the battlefield, Caesar Divi Filius taunted Fulvia with foul language, loudly accusing her of attacking him to vent her anger over her husband's infidelity with Glaphyra. On that day, Fulvia's forces were defeated by those of Agrippa. 2 months later, still trapped by Agrippa's forces and on the verge of starvation, Lucius Antonius surrendered, finally realizing that no help was forthcoming from Gaul, nor would his brother be returning from the east to rescue him. Out of respect for his fellow triumvir, Caesar allowed the brother of Marcus Antonius to go free and to continue his political career as a governor in Caesar's province of Hispania. Meanwhile, Fulvia gathered her 5 children and fled to Greece. After rounding up approximately 300 senators and equites who had supported his opponents in what is now called the Perugian War, Caesar Divi Filius gathered them into the new temple of the divine Caesar, which was still under construction. There, before the statue of his father, Caesar Divi Filius presided over the sacrificial deaths of the unfaithful, executing every last one of them as the divine son's symbolic offering to his divine father, the god Julius Caesar.